We have our Christmas show that's going to come up in a couple of weeks. And Tracy's going to perform for us.
Come on, Tracy.
Tracy's going to close it out with "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." And have a few other people that want to perform. So we'll have a great time of our brothers and sisters that have performing talent giving their talent to us. Amen. Then very excitingly, on January 3rd through the 5th, we're going to have our 2020 Winter Workshop. So that's going to be an incredible time. It'll be Friday night with the Bible Talk leaders. And then on Saturday, we're going to have workshop for both men and women. And so that's going to be incredible. Perfect. And then Sunday, we will kick it off with the beginning of 2020 with our worship service. Amen? There will be no leaders meeting today because we'll be meeting with James and the Schaefers to finalize the calendar and all the plans for the year and all of those things. And we'll be giving you next week or the week after whole calendar for the year 2020 and all the plans for the church. Amen? Well, it's great. It was great to have DJ and Donna do communion. They're very, very dear friends of Tracy and myself, and we were with them for years in D.C., and we hope at some point we'll be back together again. Maybe in 2020. Who knows? But it's great to have the Ellises here from New York. Service. I mean, we get Michael Gaddy, man.
Yeah.
We're so blessed to have such a talented, grateful, eloquent young man amongst us, and to see you become such a powerful man of God is just an amazing thing. It's wonderful. He had our old statistics. The stats that he read off were from the end of September, and so we actually have grown by 313% here. We started out with 15 people in December. Actually 6 at the very first service, but 10 members came in, and we've grown to 47, which is incredible. And that we've actually already had 7 people move away to other churches. And we have added 10 people in the last 10 weeks. And yet, there are a few people missing today. That aren't out of town, and so it's time to feed sheep and those young ones that we have amongst us. Amen? Well, Tracy and I went to India, and we got to share with the Church of Midweek our experience there. But it's an amazing thing. Today's lesson is about hardships and the things that God allows to happen in our lives. And let me tell you what, the people in India know all about hardship. In ways that we don't get to experience. And it was truly an amazing thing to be amongst them and to watch their response to hardship. And in terms of being back, it's truly an honor for Tracy and I to be here with all of you in Atlanta and to be able to see what we've been able to see God do here in Atlanta.
Come on.
And what we've been able to hear. Let's jump on into the lesson here.
Let's go on.
A couple of quotes from Jesus. I have told you these things so that in me you might have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. John 16:33. In Luke 18, verse 19, Jesus said, "Why do you call me good?" Jesus answered, "No one is good except God alone." 2 incredibly profound things that Jesus said in his days of preaching. 1, you are going to have trouble. But you already knew that. And 2, no one's good. And yet it is the thought of who's good and who's not good that wreaks havoc in our hearts. We pick up here in Hebrews. We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 12 today. And we pick up in Hebrews right after chapter 11. And Mike, while we were gone in India, did chapter 11 for us, which was great.
Come on, bro.
But in chapter 11, he talks about all the people who were killed for their faith. The disciples that lived in caves and in holes, who escaped the flames and the sword. He talked about his followers that were sawed in two, stoned, put in prison. And we're talking about people that had no media outlet to say our lives matter. Their perspective and their response to hardship put them in chapter 11 of Hebrews, the Hall of Faith. And so today we're going to conquer an age-old question that man has toward God. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Come on, Ron.
The title of the lesson, here's why. Have you ever met a person who truly, honestly professed and believed that they were not a good person? I have yet to find one. I've had people say it, but they don't really believe it when you get down there and talk. So what people are really saying is, I'm good, and the people I love are good, but bad things still happen to us. So what's the point? See, this is actually the biggest reason people turn away from God in the Bible. Is I can't follow a God who will let bad things happen to good people. And that's because of a lack of wisdom to understand that no one is good. Isn't it interesting how we just hold on to this concept so strongly when Jesus himself said he himself was not good?
Right.
You know, when you talk to somebody who's going through a difficult time in life, as a minister, I talk to a lot of people that are they're going through very difficult times in their life. And yet it's a very rare occasion, only a couple of times that I can remember, when I've asked, well, why is God allowing these things to happen to me? Is there an actual answer? Everybody says what? I don't know. And yet I put before you today, you can know and you must know why God allows the hard things to happen in your life. Because the hard things are lessons. Yeah. And to not know is to not learn the lesson. Let's turn to Jeremiah 29.
Come on, brother.
We'll prepare ourselves for Hebrews 12 with this one scripture. Jeremiah 29:11. God says through the prophet Jeremiah, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. He articulates that very strongly. Plans to give you a hope and a future. He says, then you'll come to me and call upon me. I will be heard by you when you seek me with all your heart. To find the answer of why, you've got to seek the Lord with all your heart. But then, why does God let these bad things happen? Well, point number one, to prosper. God lets these things that you perceive as bad, it's all about perspective, to prosper you and to give you a hope and to give you a future. Now let's go to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Hebrews 12 and verse 1. We'll have three scriptures in this first point. In the second point, the second two scriptures will be Romans 5, 1 through 5, and James 1, verses 2 through 4. Let's begin in Hebrews 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. The second reason why God lets bad things happen is because you need to learn perseverance. He says right here to run a race that he's marked out for you with perseverance. Perseverance is not something that's highly valued in America. So many are disappointed with the outcome of their life. Not understanding that disappointment is simply a lack of character and a lack of hope. Let's look how we get hope. Let's turn to Romans chapter 5. Come on. Let's look at the path to receiving hope. Romans 5 and verse 1, the Bible says, "Therefore, since we are justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand." I appreciated Donna's openness that we're no longer standing in grace, but on our own strength. I remember when DJ and Donna were here and Vicky was baptized. Got to see her mother be baptized and be united in Christ. That was an incredible thing. And I remember having a talk with Donna afterwards, saying, now the challenges are coming. Because Satan is angry, especially when we win our faith.
Yeah.
He says, and we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God.
Yeah.
Not only so, we also rejoice in our sufferings. Because we know, check this out, why you need to suffer. That suffering produces perseverance. But you know, suffering isn't the only thing that produces suffering. It says perseverance produces character. And character produces hope.
Wow.
So when you have no hope, you've lost your character. And hope does not disappoint. See, we never end up in the place of being disappointed with where our life is at when we have character that's produced hope. And the hardships are where the suffering comes from, which means they're the very lessons through which we are to learn hope.
Wow.
You know, think about it. Suffering, perseverance, character, and hope. And so what does that produce? Rejoicing.
That's right.
The opposite of disappointment. That's why Philippians says, rejoice in the Lord always.
Mm-hmm.
Especially during the lessons, because you're learning to be great.
Amen.
Go to James chapter 1. James chapter 1 in verse 2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers. Now we have some sisters in the house, right? Yeah. All right, this one's for you too. It's not just brothers. Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, not just one. Because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. This is a theme in the scripture. Perseverance must finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Well, now you know what God's going for. That you're mature, that you're complete, and that you don't lack anything. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should what? Ask God. So if you're disappointed, it's because you lack wisdom, so ask God. And he gives generously to all, without finding fault. And it will be given to you. Problem is, we ask why, but we really don't want to know why. See, you have things in your life that hinder you. You have things in your life that easily entangle you.
Yeah.
And 1 Corinthians 9:24 says to run this race, this marathon, as to win the prize.
Right.
It's a terrible thing when you see a disciple, and yes, they're running the race, they're like, well, I'm here, aren't I? And you forget you're supposed to run like you're going to get a prize. See, the sin makes you stop running. The hardship's not the sin. The response to the hardship to be down is the sin. So pick up your mat and run. See, running with perseverance is God's plan because that's what makes you mature and complete and brings great joy to your life in the midst of trials.
That's right, bro.
Let's go on back to Hebrews 12, verse 2. We covered the first verse right there. Hebrews 12, verse 2. What's the third reason God allows bad things to happen to good people? Because perseverance requires a stress test. Hebrews 12, verse 2. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men. See, men are always the conduit Satan uses, right? So that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And then he just kind of gives us a little dagger. In your struggle against sin, you haven't resisted to the point of shedding your blood.
Yep.
Let us fix our eyes on Jesus. The Bible says he had a joy set before him. What was the joy? He spoiled it.
Oh, sorry.
That's good, though. The joy set before him was your salvation. That's what helped him to endure everything that was happening to him. See, the joy before him wasn't that the pain was going to stop. It was that you would be saved because of the pain. And yet we say, well, I don't need any more stress in my life. Well, the only way that's actually going to happen is that you become mature and complete and have character and have hope. Now, I don't know about you, but I have quite a few cracks and character flaws.
Come on, bro.
My wife agrees.
We're with you, bro. We're with you.
But you know, stress tests expose the flaws.
Yep.
Stress tests expose cracks that we don't see. Before they become gaping holes that cause things to explode and fail. You think you don't need a stress test? Ask the crew of the Shuttle Columbia in 1985 if stress tests are good. You can't because they're gone. I remember it vividly because it was the first time we were sending a teacher into space. See, stress tests expose the cracks that would cause the hole to fail. Now, can you imagine if they had put enough pressure on the O-rings that failed before sending that shuttle into flight? They could have replaced the parts. The shuttle would have made it. Whole different history in our country. But they didn't put enough stress to protect the crew. But God will put enough stress.
Come on.
You know, Jesus passed his stress test.
Come on.
And we write it off as divine nature. But Jesus passed the stress test because of you. Because of his hope and his joy that you would be with him. If Jesus needed a stress test, boy, let me tell you what, you and I need these stress tests from God as well.
Yep.
Come on.
What's the fourth reason God allows these things to happen? I'm going to give you 9 today.
What's up, bro?
Let's go to Hebrews 12, verse 5.
Let's go.
Hebrews 12, verse 5. The writer continues on and says, "And you have forgotten the word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline. And do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines those he loves. And he punishes everyone he accepts as a son." Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? And if you are not disciplined, everyone undergoes discipline. Then you're illegitimate children and not true sons. It's interesting right there. He says, if you're not disciplined, but then he says, and everyone undergoes it. That means everyone's a true son or daughter.
There it is.
But we choose whether we're illegitimate or not by our responses.
Great point, bro.
He goes on in verse 9, he says, moreover, we've all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? if you take out your handout, of course I provided for you an outline of the book of Hebrews, chapter by chapter, and all the breakdown of the teachings. And of course there's 5 warnings, and the 5 warnings are the warnings of falling away and committing apostasy. And on the back there, you'll see Hebrews 12. And we missed the boat on this passage. There's been so much abuse and neglect in our country and in this world that we see all over the news all the time, that we see this word discipline. And we think abuse, beatings, spankings. And in this section, I have broken down. The word discipline shows up 11 times in this chapter. And now there's one mistake. In number 3, it's verses 6, 7, and 10. But in verses 5, 7, 8, and 11, the word discipline in the Greek is padia, which means education. Gives a slightly different perspective. When you know it's simply education, not a beating. In verse 9, he says a trainer, or a teacher, like a mentor. And then in verses 3, 7, and 10, he uses a very endearing word, which means to train up a child, to educate your children. See, the 3 dynamics that exist here is that education or training is like a teacher up in front of a class that's not really emotionally attached to any of the kids they're teaching. That's like the first level. It's just simply education. Then the second is like a trainer or a mentor where there's a special interest in that person, but they're not their parent. And then the third is the love of a parent, training their children to live in the right way. And so when you understand these dynamics, the chapter just comes alive. And in verse 6, he talks about punishing everyone he accepts as a son. Well, that Greek word is massacre, which is also used in John 19:1, where he says, Pilate therefore had Jesus flogged. This word punish is the word flog. It's the same Greek word. And so when you understand that, then as we read through this passage, you can understand the dynamics a whole lot better. That the hardships are education, and that our human fathers are our mentors. Because what God's trying to get us to understand is, okay, so you've had education, you've had teaching, your human fathers, they did their best, he said. But he says, but I'm always right.
Come on.
One time mom's not right.
Come on.
But he says, I flog everyone I accept as a son. See, part of Jesus' training for perfection was to be flogged. What makes us any better? What makes us think we don't need a stress test of flogging in our life if Jesus did? See, you got to understand, the Spirit is trying to teach you, right? Yes, to feel hurt, just like Jesus feels hurt. To feel angry, like Jesus felt angry. To feel compassion, like Jesus felt compassion. But also to love the way Jesus loved. He says, you're my child, and I love you so much, and I'm going to train you just like my son Jesus. To transform you, to be in the likeness of my son Jesus.
Great point, bro.
When you ask the question why, because we all do when hard things happen, why is this happening? Why is it got to keep happening? When's it going to stop? You got to really consider the source of the question. Is the source of the question really that you do want to know why? So that you can be like Jesus, or are you really just saying, please stop? You think about, I'll share a few things that God's allowed to happen in my life, and you consider what God's allowed to happen in your life as well. Not comparing, because our sufferings are our own sufferings. They're very real to each one of us.
Right.
Whether it would not cause someone else to suffer or not. If we suffer, we're suffering. The whole point of this is we're supposed to learn from it. You know, growing up, I started at age 5 having migraines, which came anywhere between 3 to 6 times a week.
Wow.
Every single day I had a test. The teachers always thought I was trying to get out of tests because I'd have a migraine always. Had a reading disorder, so I didn't finish any books in school. One of the only books I've ever finished is the Bible. That makes doing lessons and these kind of things very challenging at times. I've had some pretty severe infections in my lifetime that ran throughout my body. Infections that they didn't have cures for at the time. Caused me to have boils. Had a couple of bad accidents. Crippling spinal injuries, 19 surgeries, both knees replaced, 2 discs for my neck replaced. I've endured some pretty big physical hardships. But I was also sexually abused and physically abused and verbally abused in ways I would not want to be upon anybody. Probably the toughest one, though, came out as a parent, watching my son. So he was born normal, but then he got brain damage from meningitis. So we have a special needs child because of that. And that was probably one of the biggest, hardest things to endure. And to ask really why. And to really want to know why. It's funny though, God lets all these things happen. And that's part of a relationship with God, is to wrestle. When people do things that you don't like, you ask them why, right?
Right.
You talk to them about it, right? And you consider what is the conversation? You talk and they talk. And so often we only scream at God, but we don't listen to Him and read about it, to listen to what He has to say. And we fail to understand how much love and trust it takes for God to give us these hardships, to allow them or to make them happen. I remember when my kids were growing up, we went on vacation, and we went out to the river, and we hit a shallow spot in the river that seemed to go for a really long ways, and the boys were like playing in the shallow area, and as they got further and further out, I knew at some point it wouldn't be shallow anymore, and the river had a pretty good current, so I said, come on boys, come on back. And they were like, keep on going. And so eventually, Dylan just kind of disappeared. He just down the river took him off. And my oldest son, Deepen, and he's the one with the challenges. He dove right on in without even hesitating. Swam out there, grabbed his brother, and turned to try and pull him back, and couldn't fight the current. So the river's taking them both. And when I saw they got far enough out, I kind of started slowly making my way toward them. At the point when they disappeared, Tracy started screaming at me too. The boys are screaming, "We're going to die! We're going to die!" And Tracy's over there going, "What are you doing? Go get them!" And, I think I chose to do in that moment what I now understand God does with us.
Yep.
Which is, I knew I was going to save them. But they didn't know that, and it was time for a good lesson. So I just slowly walked toward them. And, they're screaming up and down, bloody murder, and I'm letting them have it. This is what a lot of the people would say, kicking them in the face. And you see people not kick us in the face, bro. That's what they were getting. And yet, it's one of the stories that they both talk about. Because I allowed them to suffer, knowing I would save them from it. And that's what God does with us all the time. See, one of the big mistakes we make as parents is we try and save our kids from pain and suffering.
Yep.
When the pain and suffering is actually what gives them character. We raise kids that will never have hope if we don't let them go through their suffering. There was on Thanksgiving we watched a movie together. We watched Gemini Man.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a quote in the movie that I think is very fitting. And if we picture what Will Smith said as to the young man that was his clone, as if God were talking to us, the young man had realized that the guy he called his father was actually his maker, and that he had made many more beyond him, and that who he valued most was the best of them. And so he took his rifle and put it in his face and was going to shoot him. And Will Smith, the guy that was cloned, he stood next to him, and he had the picture of the father and the son holding the gun in his face, and Will Smith standing right here. And he did exactly what God does to us. He sees us, how we're going to respond to things. And, he looked at him and he said, "Look at me."
Wow.
He said, "You pull that trigger, you're going to break something inside yourself.
Yeah.
That'll never get fixed." And then he paused to let him decide. And then he said, "Don't." Paused again. Then he put his hand on the gun and he said, "Let it go." All the while, letting the young man decide for himself what he was going to do. He said, "Give it to me." And then he said, "You don't want those ghosts. Trust me." This is what God does with us all the time. He lets us have the hardship, and then he says, "Look at me. Stop looking at the hardship.
Right.
Don't sin. Don't give in. Let it go." See, it's in the times of prosperity that we feel close to God. That's your sinful nature talking. And it's the times when God is really asserting his fathership with us that we accuse him of forgetting us. And we accuse him because we're actually in the process of forgetting him and what his word says. It's like the poem Footsteps. We stand high and mighty. There's only one set of footprints. Where were you? Of course, God would carry us. Is where he was. See, he's your father. He cares for you. He's trying to carry you through your trials. He gives you instructions on what to do and how to respond. He's actually trying to save you from the fate of the rest of the world. Why does he let that bad thing happen? He says, "Because I'm your father, I say so." Number 5. Verse 10. Why? Because it's best for you. Verse 10 through 13. He says, "Our fathers disciplined us for a little while as they thought best. But God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful later on. However, it produces a harvest of righteousness and of peace for every disciple of Jesus." Is that what it says? Does everybody get it? No, it's for those who are trained by it. It says, "Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed." He's already saved you. This is about the ones who don't know me yet. Pick up your mat and walk, so that they'll follow you. This is what's best for you. You said you wanted to change the world. He says, "Your human fathers, they might have been best for you, but my lessons are always best." And you got to understand, what's God gunning for? What's he trying to produce? And yes, he's trying, because his efforts are dependent on your response.
Yep.
You're the only one that can stop him from acting and teaching what he wants to teach. See, you're the one that determines in which way God will be faithful. Whether he be faithful with blessings or with curses. all dependent on your response.
It's true.
See, what he's gunning for is for you to share in his holiness. He's gunning for you to have a harvest of righteousness. But you can't have the harvest of righteousness if you blow off his simple instructions.
Right.
Because they're not hard.
Amen.
They're hard decisions to do these easy things he says to do. Like let it go.
Come on.
It's hard to let go when you're Lord.
True.
Yeah.
What else is he going for? Peace. Why? Because he knows you need it. And the avenue to peace is to have the opportunity to tempt you to throw away your peace. Think about that. Holiness, a harvest of righteousness, peace. Who doesn't want those things? Our problem is we want it without trial. We want it without challenge.
Yep.
So we get angry
Yep.
because we didn't get what we want, how we wanted it. So we try and force our will on God. How's that working for you? Why do Christians know it took suffering to save them, but want to believe it? They shouldn't have to suffer for others to be saved. See, Jesus didn't suffer and die to save you from suffering. He died so that you would be empowered by your suffering.
Come on, Rod.
And your ability to change the world and make it a better place is dependent on your response to the suffering he allows you to have. It's dependent on your choice to be trained by it or not. His purpose and his mission are bigger than your hardships.
Yeah.
So let him heal you so that everyone in your life has a chance. Number 6. So you don't miss the grace of God. Hebrews 12, verse 14. Of course, I think God made it today where the people who need this lesson most are not here.
Oh.
Hebrews 12, verse 14 says, make every effort to live in peace with all men and to be holy. So without holiness, no one will see the Lord. No one can seek God through your frustration.
That's true. That's true.
No one can see God through your exasperation. They have to see God through compassion and love. And just like everyone's suffering is their own and very real to them, so is their perspective of not receiving compassion, whether it's actually true or not. And that's the joy of the journey of helping one another, is expanding how well and all the different ways you can show compassion and love. You know, he goes on here and he says, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled or rather. Verse 15, he says, see to it that no one misses the grace of God. It's funny, we see to it that people call us back. But we're supposed to see to it that they don't miss the grace. Why? Because a bitter root will grow up to cause trouble and defile many.
Right.
It says, see to it that no one is sexually immoral or godless like Esau, who for a single needle sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Afterward, as you know, see, God just assumes that you read his word. When he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected. He could bring about no change of mind, though he sought the blessing with tears. God gives you hardship partially so you don't miss his grace. See, a bad response to God's blessings make you bitter. And when you're bitter, you miss the grace of God because you can't see Him working. When you're not able to see God, that's when you choose to sin. And when you choose to sin, you break yourself inside. Sometimes in ways that will never be repaired. This is why it says right here, see to it that no one is sexually immoral. Because when you're sexually immoral, you break something inside that never gets fixed. It can be forgiven, but it doesn't get fixed ever. Yeah. It's always lurking in the background. You open up it's like a portal for Satan to get you anytime he wants. Those who refuse to obey always become bitter. That's why we have to influence obedience with one another. Oh, we can take the easy route and try and command each other and, whatever, but influence is one of the most powerful things in the kingdom. Because if we sin enough to where the Bible says we shipwreck our faith, we can get God to the point where He says enough's enough. And just like Esau, no matter how much we can come with tears. Don't believe that garbage that people teach. You can't lose your salvation. People say once saved, always saved. That's garbage. It's not in the Scriptures. What's in the Scriptures is that no one can separate you from the love of God. Make no mistake, you can throw your faith back in His face.
Come on.
Yeah.
All it takes is to continue to sin in the same way until your faith's gone. I hear people all the time, I'll never denounce God. I'll never. No, just keep sinning and see.
Preach it, God.
It's true.
Let me tell you what, it takes a whole lot of effort for a person to lose their salvation. You shouldn't walk around scared you're going to lose your salvation. But you shouldn't be fooled and deceived that you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Keep her up.
Man.
Going to India changed me a lot. I saw levels of gratitude that I had never seen before. We were when they beg there. Here, there's a lot of entitlement when people are begging. There's an attitude like you need to be giving me something. The people there walk up to you and they just tap you on the arm very lightly. And then they just keep tapping. And they go. Why? Because they're really hungry. Like really hungry. Like they're going to die if they don't do something. And, I gave this little girl 50 rupees. And we were at a stop on the way to the Taj Mahal, and I gave her this little tiny amount of money, and she ran inside and got herself a soda. And we were all getting back on the bus or waiting for everybody to get on the bus. And she went around the bus looking for Tracy and I. And she walked up and down until she saw us, and then she sat with her cup in her hand. She just kept waiting. And she waited like the whole 20 minutes until the bus took off. Just continually saying thank you. Until we left, and then she just walked off. All the ones that kind of make a living doing that, they were all staying. They were just going person to person until they got more and more and more. She was satisfied with a little money to buy soda. And she spent 20 minutes saying thank you.
Wow.
It's the kind of gratitude we need to have for ourselves.
Yeah.
Come on, God. That's right.
And then there was the guy I sat with at the leper colony. And when I walked up, he had tears on his face. And he had both his thumbs, and he had these two fingers. And all the rest of his fingers were gone. So pretty much just palms and thumbs. And we had brought them food, and so he was trying to eat the food, which was an apple. Imagine trying to eat an apple. And he was trying to break it. And so I thought he was frustrated. So I thought the tears. So he gave me the apple, and I broke it into a few pieces and gave it to him. He had dropped it on the ground. It was all dirty, so I was trying to wipe it off for him and everything. And it wasn't really that he was frustrated. he wanted me to eat it with him. And, I didn't hesitate. I mean, this guy was suffering in ways I can't even fathom. And so I ate the apple with him, and then he got really happy. He was all smiling. And he reached over to the bag and he got an orange out. He broke it open and he took half of it and gave me the other half. We shared a meal together. And I didn't have an interpreter or anything, but we spent about 20 minutes together, just sitting, smiling. And I never thought I'd eat an apple out of the hand of a leper whose fingers had been rotted off. And yet, I just went, we have antibiotics, they don't. So I got real sick. And I was in bed for a week. But we have antibiotics. But this guy, I later learned from one of the interpreters that he was crying because having leprosy for over 30 years like he did, it's a nerve disease, and it also begins to mess with your brain, your memories and stuff. And this guy was stuck. He had no memories except for the last ones, which was his family abandoning him. So he sits there all day long, and the only thing he can remember is the abandonment of his family leaving him. So that's why there were tears coming out of his face. We have the audacity to get angry about our pitiful things that we call suffering. He says, I'm going to guard you from bitterness. That's why I'm letting so many of these things happen. So you don't miss my grace. Number 7. Let's move on to verse 18.
Well, bro.
Because you need to deepen your worship. In verse 18 he says, you've not come to a mountain that can be touched and is burning with fire, to darkness or gloom or storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. Even if an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I'm trembling with fear. But you come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, to the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. You realize that's what happens whilst we're worshiping? To the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of righteous men made perfect. To Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. We continually need to deepen our worship. Never once should a guy come up here and feel they need to antagonize you to respond. There should always be an eruption of joy, awe, and splendor at our worship services. I don't ever ask you twice. If you're not there, then I preach or speak in a way to get you there. I'm not going to antagonize you to speak more loudly, or to be more fired up. God's word's supposed to do that for you in the morning before you come here.
Yeah. Come on.
But it's interesting here. It says there in verse 20, they begged, verse 19 and 20, they begged that no further word be spoken to them because they could not bear what was commanded. There's a person on their way out. Right there. You've got to forgive. The commandment's easy, but you can't bear it. These are the things that entangle us easily. These are the things that cause us to miss the lesson. These are the things that drive us into bitterness. And God says, I'm just going to keep giving you the lesson until you learn it so you don't stay bitter. I mean, you think about it. This isn't the Old Testament where we have to live without the Spirit. It's not like God's sadistic or unfair. I mean, you're worshiping worshiping a God who gave up his son and watched him tortured for you and me. That demands appropriate worship.
Yes, it does.
Come on.
That deserves an acceptable amount of reverence and awe.
Yep.
We need to deepen our worship. Number 8. Why do bad things happen? Because you need protection. Verse 25. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? These are lessons from heaven. This isn't a flawed man trying to tell you something that you think they're a hypocrite about. These are hardships from God. These are disciplines from God. And I think of discipline for the most part with God as like a guy that wants to be a great basketball player. They discipline themselves. They'll shoot 700 shots a day until they shoot perfect. That's the kind of discipline that God's trying to get from you. He'll give you the other disciplinary kind if you make it, but that's not what he's trying. Think of this. The Israelites complained when they had hardships. Didn't have the faith to go take things that God told them to go take. Complained about their leaders. Complained about each other. If the Israelites didn't escape the wrath of God, what makes you think that you'll survive if you live?
Come on, bro.
No matter what the hardship is, the call is to be thankful and grateful. The call is to have a joy set before you. Because that's what changes the world. Lastly, why does God let bad things happen to good people? God says, because I'm making you unshakable. Verse 26. At that time, his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised once more, I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken. See, God's purging your heart of anything that will shake. That has created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we're receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and in awe, for our God is a consuming fire. God says, man, I am going to shake things up. Those who are not mine will be shaken. They'll be shaken right out. He says, but you are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Well, what is the kingdom? The hearts of men and women who are saved. He says, you're receiving each other. We've got to be a whole lot more grateful for each other.
Come on.
We've got to be a whole lot more compassionate with one another. We've got to persevere a whole lot more with each other.
Come on.
Because you have a kingdom that can't be shaken. Do you know the people that are here now, that'll be here 10 years from now, 20 years from now? As many times as you sin against them, they'll forgive you. Or else they won't be here. Because that's what always happens. Those who don't forgive leave. He says, those who are not mine will be gone. Oh, but you are the few disciples that have received that kingdom, that have fixed your eyes on Jesus during the hardships, who let the discipline of God give them strength and build character and produces hope in you. You, like Jesus, have a joy set before you, the evangelization of the nations in your generation. And you understand the answer to the question, why? You understand the answer. Is that the truth is, God lets incredibly hard things happen to people who think they're good to actually train them to action. Your hope, your joy, your reverence, your perseverance. See, you know that the reward for those things will be a harvest of righteousness and a harvest of peace that heals not only you, but heals the world. That is why God lets bad things happen. Love you guys.